This episode was brought to you by Manscaped.
Initiating moisture.
Welcome to the Moist Meter. Today we're taking a look at Resident Evil 3 Remake. Resident Evil 2 Remake was one of the best games of 2019 and totally reinvented what it meant to be a remake. When you hear that word, there's always a negative connotation of just a soulless cash grab, just like a little fresher coat of paint and that's it. Resident Evil 2 Remake took that, bent it over, and slapped it with a belt. It totally changed it. It was an incredible game with a lot of passion put into it, and it was an absolute joy to play. So I had a lot of hype coming into Resident Evil 3, and I gotta say, I'm a bit disappointed with it. By no means is it bad, but there is a lot of things that I think Resident Evil 2 did better, and this one just kind of misses the mark a lot more times than Resident Evil 2 did. I don't like to just directly compare them, so I'm not going to do that past this stage. So let's talk about Resident Evil 3. Let me pull down its pants and show you the penis I'm talking about here. So Resident Evil 3, in much of the same way as Resident Evil 2, is another total reimagining of the original, and it still has that same level of passion and soul put into the design choices and as well as everything that's laid out here. I can always appreciate the visuals here. It looks fucking fantastic, absolutely beautiful. Some great moments, some really interesting cutscenes, and a lot of really cool shit with Nemesis. I think Nemesis is a lot cooler than Mr. X. Last comparison, I promise. But Nemesis is fucking awesome in this game. Every cutscene with Nemesis is fantastic, but it's a double-edged dildo here because on the flip side of that coin, he's really underutilized in the boss fights you have with him. Nemesis rarely chases you throughout this game, whereas Mr. X was a constant looming presence I felt for the majority of the game. Nemesis is only there a couple of times really. He's not ever like on your ass, pounding that shit that often. And when you do encounter him, it's usually for an underwhelming boss fight. Which sucks fuck because he is so cool in the cutscenes and they really hype him up right out of the gates in the beginning of the game, so you're excited to encounter him in the world and fight him. But when you actually do get that opportunity, it's a big letdown. You fight him multiple times throughout the very short 4-hour campaign, but every time you do, it's just kind of like this little sad wet fart. It's like, he's just a bullet sponge. Because that's really all he is. A lot of the fights are just him being a bullet sponge. One of the fights are just copy and pasted. You fight the same exact mechanics twice against him, with one little difference between them, but not a whole lot. It's just really lazy boss fights with him, and I just feel like they didn't utilize him, and he was really cool too, so that was a bit of a shame. But aside from that, the core gameplay loop is what you're familiar with from the other entries. It's the same exact mechanics, and that's not a bad thing because I do enjoy it. I will say I had a lot more of a difficult struggle with Jill's inventory management. I felt like they were constantly throwing things at me that I wanted, but I never had the space for. So you really need to focus on collecting your inventory upgrades as soon as possible because you're going to have a lot of shit fed to you. It's really a lot of items that I felt like this time I was constantly struggling with to make room, and some of the key items took up 2 slots in the inventory, so you really had to make a lot of sacrifices, I felt, at least on Jill's side. Carlos, that was never really an issue because he was more of just like a fucking full throttle, high octane, big machine gun badass kind of thing. But for Jill, it was a lot more of a nitpicking inventory manager that I felt was like the actual boss of the game. I had to keep dropping shit constantly, and then I'd be malnourished going into an encounter or trying to get somewhere. That was a bit of a headache, but not too big of a deal. I also felt like it was a little more RNG reliant when zombies would go down and when they'd get staggered, which is also a headache because the enemies are beefy as shit. They're all pretty tanky. They're all pretty much bullet sponges throughout the game, so it does get to be a bit of a headache, especially when you're mismanaging your inventory. If you make one mistake, you could really kind of shoot yourself in the foot for a while. But again, the gameplay loop isn't all that dissimilar from what you're expecting and what you're used to. There's no improvements to it. There's nothing they take a step back on, really. It's pretty much the same, and there's really nothing wrong with that. Just a couple of things that were an issue in the previous entries are an issue here when it comes to gameplay. Now, I want to move on to the narrative here. This game is really, really strong in the first half and loses a ton of steam going into the second half. The second half of this game is significantly weaker than the first half. The first half is fucking outstanding. Really, really great. From every possible perspective, just really enjoyable and really fun. And then the second half becomes really tedious. You have to go through these really laborious fucking projects that you have to collect shit on or like fight your way through. I feel like at times they felt like, we need to pad out time. Let's throw them into the room and then we'll raise 8 zombies. So then you have these 8 fucking bullet sponges that you have to meticulously get through and spend a lot of ammo on just to sink some shit in. And I didn't really like that very much. I didn't think that was a very strong design choice. And it didn't help that I think the narrative wasn't that strong. The main villain here is fucking terrible. I actually think the villain in this one is truly horrendous. I'm not going to spoil anything in the narrative here, but at the end of the game, he makes a decision that is so nonsensical to his character that it really just feels like they want him to be a mustache-twirling evil guy for the sake of being a cartoonish evil man. They have him hyped up as this character that's motivated by certain things, and at the end of the game, he totally betrays all of that just for the sake of being evil. I mean, even the main character says, "Why did you do that?" And his answer is verbatim, "I don't know, I don't care." Like, that's just so fucking dumb. So I don't think the narrative is all that great, especially towards the end. There's nothing wrong with it throughout the game. I can't say it's bad, because it's definitely not bad. A very weak villain, and the narrative's not super tight, but it is not bad. It's serviceable, and it gets you where you need to go, and it is still interesting, especially when collecting some of the other outside lore. Now, talking about the biggest problem everyone has with this game, the length. The game is $60. And the campaign is 4 hours. It took me 4 hours and 13 minutes to beat it start to finish. And I spanked its cheeks red. I collected a lot of things. I went out of my way to get extra little pieces of lore. And it still only took me 4 hours and 13 minutes to get through. So it's not a very long game. And there's really not a whole lot of replayability to it. I can't imagine someone finishes the game and they're like, fuck, I can't wait to get back in there and do that all again. Doesn't really have that to it. So you're paying $60 for about 4 to 5 hours worth of enjoyment, and it is good. I do think it is a good game, but I feel like a lot of people are going to find it overpriced for how much it has to it, because it isn't a whole ton. It's not what you're used to from a $60 experience in terms of its amount of content. I personally don't think the length of a game is indicative of its quality or price tag. If a game's 50 hours, but 40 hours are spent with just needlessly dumb padding for time, I don't think it's worth $60. It's not a good game just because it takes 50 fucking hours to grind some terrible shit or farm some shit up. I'm totally fine with a game being shorter as long as it delivers 4 to 6 or 7 hours worth of just high intensity quality. And I do think for the most part this game does hit that, or at least ride that line, because I did enjoy it. I do find it to be a good game, but I think it is lacking, especially with what I was going into expecting it. So let's just plug this into the moist meter. I'm giving Resident Evil 3 Remake a 65%. By no means is it a bad game, but I feel like most fans are going to be disappointed by it, and I feel coming into it, if you're not already a Resident Evil fan, there's going to be a lot of things you take issue with. This has a lot of clunk to it, and that's a little bit of its charm, to be honest. The puzzles aren't all that deep either. The puzzles are pretty fucking bare bones, if you can even call them puzzles. It's pretty much just little chores you run, like, hey, go over here and collect this. You see on your map where it is, so you can just look on your map, go collect it, and run back. Not really a puzzle. There's not a whole lot of thinking that goes on to solve some of this shit. So I do feel like there are going to be a lot of hiccups people don't appreciate. At least I didn't appreciate them very much, but I do still enjoy it and overall enjoyed my time with the game. Gamers, it's time we talk about something we all experience. Hairy balls. It's time to stop having such hairy balls. That's why Manscaped is here to make that easy for you. It'll not only trim your balls, but it'll leave them looking immaculate, with a glistening glow to them, a heavenly light shining upon them, and no injuries along the way. I told the story of how I cut my shaft during an unfortunate trimming accident down south, but luckily ever since I switched to Manscaped that hasn't been an issue. Manscaped has brought together the world's top scientists to create the ultimate ball trimming device, the Lawnmower 3.0. The Lawnmower 3.0 has a cutting-edge ceramic blade with advanced skin-safe technology, so not only is it extremely efficient, it's extremely safe. You'll never accidentally cut yourself or just completely injure yourself, mutilate yourself, or anything like that. There's also the Perfect Package Kit 3.0, which comes with the Lawnmower 3.0, as well as many other tools that you'll definitely want to have in your Batman utility belt for ball grooming and just general care down there. It's a very sensitive area, so treat it with respect. If you're interested in trying Manscaped, you can get 20% off plus free shipping on your order if you use code MOIST at manscaped.com. That's code MOIST at manscaped.com to get 20% off and free shipping. So yeah.